Okay, again I've said welcome, Shabbat Shalom everyone, and the Shabbat, the topic of the Shabbat of this morning is called Parasha. The Parasha of this morning is called Parasha Bamidbar. We are starting a new book. I want to remember that last week we ended the book of the Levite, the Leviticus. That is what we ended last week, and this week we are starting the book of Bamidbar, and in other languages it is known as the book of Numbers. Because why is it called the book of Numbers? Because it started with what? With census, with counting. That's why they call it the book of Numbers. But in Hebrew it is called Bamidbar, and Bamidbar in Hebrew meaning the wilderness, in the desert. Okay, so in the desert, that is where God spoke to his people and to Moshe, our teacher, to count the people for a particular reason, for a particular purpose. Intro. And also, please don't forget, I want to quickly say that I subtitle this week Parasha, who is the captain of your ship? I'm asking us a question here. Who is the captain of your ship? Is it yourself, or is it something else? Is it money, or is it your parents, or is it your husband? Is it your children? Is it God? Who is the captain of your ship? The fourth book of the Bible and its first parasha is called Bamidbar, which means in the wilderness. It is also known as the book of Numbers since it begins with counting of the children of Israel. The majority of the events related in the book occurred during the giving of the Torah to the children of Israel at Mount Sinai and after the erection of the inauguration of the sanctuary. The children of Israel had received the Torah, had been forgiven for their sin of the golden calf, and Adonai was to now lead them from the wilderness of Sinai into the land of Israel to take possession of it. However, the events that are related in the book of Bamidbar lead to a different outcome entirely, and the children of Israel are to pay a heavy price through committing further sins in the wilderness, resulting in a delay of just under 39 years. In the wilderness, before finally conquering the east bank of the Jordan under the leadership of Moshe and arriving at the plain of Moab opposite Jericho, where Joshua was to take over the command. In the many journey in the wilderness year, the children of Israel undergo many trials and tribulations and receive many punishments. However, in these 38 years, they are to learn much Torah under their leader and their teacher, Moshe. The Torah is to be taught to them in the wilderness, a place of Hefka, a place without a owner, where the divine presence rested. I'm just trying to give us an overall overview of the book of Bamidbar, the importance and the issue that are raised and what actually happened in this book. So the book of Bamidbar is so important to the children of Israel because it gives us the genealogy of each family, of each tribe of the people of Israel, and it is in this book that we are going to see the death and also a lot of bloodshed that were shed, and the death of Balaam the prophet, who opposed the children of Israel in trying to do what? To curse them. So they are going to be a very, very nourishing, very important book that as we continue to study it. The word wilderness in Hebrew, if we read it backward, it can spell in much blood. Indeed, as we shall see, the event related in this book take a great toll on the children of Israel, and much blood is split by plague and violence. Furthermore, it is ordained that the entire congregation, over 20 years old at the time of the Exodus from Egypt, were to die in the wilderness and not cross over the Jordan with Joshua. There were a handful of exceptions. which is Caleb and Yehoshua, that actually went over the Jordan. However, in the book of Bamidbar, the prophet Aaron and Miriam died, as does Nahshon, the prince of the tribe of Judah. Nahshon's death is unrecorded in the Torah as his heroic show of faith in Adonai in the Sea of Reed, which caused it to part. After his death, the united fabric of the children of Israel is to be broken down. Thus, the word Bamidbar can be understood as wheat or in much blood. Why did so much blood have to be spilled in the wilderness? This we shall discover only after chapter 10 of the book, when the trouble begins. For now, it can be said that the matter is connected with the past, from the day of Abraham, as the deed of the father are signs to the children. I repeat, the deeds of the father are signs to the children. When Bilam is finally killed toward the end of the 39 years in the wilderness in Parashat Matot, the trouble ends. Who is Bilam? He is Laban, Kemuel, nemesis of Abraham. This is the general overview of the book. And now I'm going to go to a little bit more discussion and detailed explanation of this particular parasha of today, which is Bamidbar. The book of Numbers begins with the Torah command to take a census of the Hebrew nation. Each male over 20 years of age from every tribe was to be counted. However, the tribe of Levi were singled out to remain uncounted in the national census. You shall not count the tribe of Levi, and you shall not take a census of them from among the children of Israel. Numbers chapter 1 verse 49. Levi was indeed counted as separately and differently. His children were counted from a month old as opposed to 20 years old. They were counted at a separate occasion, and their numbers were not included in the national census. Why did Levi merit such distinctive treatment? The Midrash tells us that Adonai specially designated them. They were considered as the king's special legion. During the sins of the golden calf, when so many of their fellow Israelites served the idol, the tribe of Levi was stalwart in his opposition. Therefore, Levi was chosen to serve in the temple in the place of the firstborn, who were originally designated to perform the service. The Midrash quotes, "The Almighty, the Levites made themselves close to him, and I will be close to them." So this is the reason why that the children of the Levite, the tribe of Levi, were not counted as usual with the rest people of the tribes, of the rest tribes, the other 11 tribes of Israel. We need to remember that God said that Levi is mine, and he and God is their inheritance, and God is their portion. So they don't have any land, they don't have any property in Israel, for God is their inheritance and God is their portion. And why is this so? Midrash is telling us that this was so because they stood tall. They stood very tall. They were not like others that when things happen or when trouble want to start, they keep their mouth shut. They close their eyes because they don't want to be told. They don't want to offend one person, or they don't want to step on toes. But in the case of the Levites, they weren't like that. They stood tall and they defend the name of God. And so therefore, for the reward for them defending the name of God, God took them specially for himself, to replace them for all the firstborn, all the male firstborn in Israel, for them to serve in the temple. God spoke to Moses in the Sinai desert in the tent of meeting on the first day of the second month in the second year after the exodus from the land of Egypt, saying, that is Bamidbar chapter 1 verse 1. once again, the Torah is going to count the people of Israel, and Rashi explained why. Because they were dear to him. He counted them often. When they left Egypt, he counted them. Shemot chapter 12, verse 37. When many fell because of the sin of the golden calf, he counted them to know the number of the survivor. Shemot chapter 32, verse 28. When he came to cause his divine presence to rest among them, he counted them. On the 1st of Nisan, the Mishkan was erected, and on the 1st of Iyar, he counted them again. So it's like God is fun in counting his people. Why is it so fun in counting them? Because he loves them. He wants to know how many of them remain. It is very, very important numbers to know how many of them remains. So to God, I can say that it is a very important thing to him to know how many are his people and his children. Rabbi Israel Meir is bothered. Surely there were some other Israelites who did not serve the golden calf. Why then was Levi singled out to serve in the Mishkan? Why didn't Adonai select anyone who did not serve the golden calf? That is a question. It's a question. It's a question from one of our Rabbi Israel Meir, who is saying, why is it that it was only Levi that was singled out? It wasn't only Levi that didn't serve the golden calf. There were other tribes, or there were some other people who did not bow down, or who did not go one-time eyes, or who did not do anything negative. But why is it that God himself, in his awesomeness, in his power, only choose the Levites? Why not taking all the people that didn't serve the golden calf? Rabbi Meir explained that Levi did much than passively not serve the idol. When Moshe cried, "Whoever is on the side of Adonai, join with me," the only collective group who responded were the Levites. Many Israelites may have refrained from worshipping the calf. The Gerard Rabin explained, but only those who stood up and protested deserve to direct the spirituality of the nation. While silence may sometimes remove the cloth of culpability, it will never crown you with the strength of leadership. What I'm saying here is that it was only the Levites that stood up as a collective group. It was only the tribe of Levi that stood up as a collective group and said, we are going to defend the name of God. We will not allow this sin. We will not allow this iniquity. We will not allow this transgression to pass through us. That will never happen. But other tribes, there were people who did not serve it, but they were being passive. I don't want to offend my mama because my mama go and serve it, but me, I'm not going to serve it, but I'm not going to condemn my mama, or I'm not going to condemn my father, or I'm not going to condemn my son, or I'm not going to condemn my daughters, or I'm not going to condemn my children. But they were just being passive, even though they didn't serve the golden calf. But the only collective group, the only tribe that stood up firm and stood together with Moshe was the tribe of Levi, and that is why they deserve this credibility, and that is why God took them unto himself as his personal soldier and servants. Here is what another Midrash said. The Midrash Rabbah 1:7 teaches, why did the pasuk, that is the verse, stress that Adonai spoke to Moshe specifically in the Midbar? Our sages have learned that the Torah was given through water, fire, and wilderness. Additionally, only one who makes himself like Hefka, that is ownerless, will be able to acquire the wisdom of the Torah. Why is it that the Midrash said? Why is it that the Holy One, blessed be He, spoke specifically to Moshe in the Midbar, that is in the wilderness, because we need to understand what does wilderness represent. What is the representation of the wilderness? A place of a place that has no owner. You know, wilderness is a place of danger. Wilderness is a place of you have to 100% completely depend upon God, where you don't say that it is by my power or by my strength, it is by my wisdom, it is by my understanding that I achieve all these things. So therefore I ask again, who is the captain of your ship? Who do you give the confidence to direct you? You might say, it is because of my understanding, it's because of my profession, it's because I went to school, I'm a professor, and so on and so forth. That is why I acquire all these things. That is why I am blessed, and that is why I have all this prosperity, the beautiful wife and beautiful children. It is by my own power. It is by my own wisdom. But my friend, I want to tell you, it is not. It is not because you are so smart or you are too wise that you have all these things. It is by His grace. It is by the grace of the Almighty. It is by the love of the Almighty, and which is telling you, He's saying, I am the dark captain. Because normally, looking at what the situation is going on in the world now, where we've seen through this process of COVID-19 that actually we are not in control. That it is only God who is in control. A small little virus scatter all plans. A small single thing that we cannot even see, a macroscopic life, scatter all our plans that we have planned for years. I want to take vacation, I want to do this, I want to do that. Everybody is locked in now, cannot do nothing. So that is what God is telling us, that it is only in the wilderness that you can come, when you have to remove all those imaginative thoughts of your mind that it is by my ego. But that in the wilderness, that is when you have to completely rely upon God, where the meditation can be real. In the world where it is hustling and bustling, where everything is up and down, work and work and work, you have no time, you have no even a time to say, okay, I want to think about God. But in the wilderness, you have the full attention of God, and God has your full attention. A number of explanations are given for this hefka, or this ownerless, a place without no owner. Some say that one needs to attach no importance to worldly things. They should be like hefka in his eyes. Others say that one must be humble, willing to learn from and everyone. What is the significance of the Torah having been given in the wilderness? Yet again, a number of explanations are given. The Kisar Sofer writes that the Torah was only given to those who eat the manna, those who are willing to give up the luxuries of life, being satisfied with the physical necessity, thereby focusing on the spiritual necessity. This is what it says again. I repeat. The Torah was only given to those who eat the manna. What is the manna? He said that the manna has no taste. It is tasteless. It tastes exactly of what you imagine in your mind. If you imagine that you want it to taste like a beef, it's going to taste like a beef. If you imagine that you want it to taste like an apple, it will taste like an apple. Whatever you imagine for it to taste, that is what it's going to taste in your mouth. So he's saying that those who are willing for themselves to forgo the luxuries of this physical world, those who are willing to toil the work of the Torah. Because as I said, that the Torah is a burden, is a yoke, and we have to carry it, because we have already agreed before, when God was giving us the commandment, He said, with those that adhere and those that are unborn. So it is our responsibility as a people to do what? To carry the Torah and to spread this word to the ends of the earth. To tell them the loving power and the loving grace of the Almighty. That He loves each and every one. Even the Gentiles, He loves them. So therefore, we have to do what? To spread this word of life. Other writes that a midbar is a place where anyone who wants can enter. So, too, with Adonai and His Torah, all those who truly want to come or who want to connect with Him, as I once said, that if you want to connect with God, you have to connect with God on a personal level. If you want to connect with God, I repeat, you have to connect with God on a personal level. God is not you can't. I want to run to a synagogue and I want to be there every Shabbat and that is it. No, that is not enough. It is not only on Shabbat that you can connect with God. The most important is that your sacred time. That your sacred time in your house, where you are calm, when everything is calm, where there is no buzzing and hustling, where you can concentrate and give yourself completely 100% unto the Almighty. The personal event, the personal event that have been taking place during the past few weeks have given us a different understanding in this concept of the Torah being given in the wilderness. When our lives are in their regular routine, it's easy to think that we are the one who are in control or the driver's seat, controlling our destiny. When that routine is broken, then we enter a wilderness of unforeseen challenges and surprises. We very quickly and clearly realize that so very little is really in our control. As I just said now, with the situation that we find ourselves in, this thing just completely destroy our routine, our normal routine. Now, we as a human being can now realize and understand the luxury of to gather together, the luxury to move around without no problem, the luxury of you to breathe fresh air without mask. So we need to, with all these little things, we can appreciate those little things of life that the Holy One, blessed be He, has given us for us to enjoy with. That it is not in our control, that it is God who is in control. Here is a short story about a man who tried fairly unsuccessfully to sell his van. It's a story. To add insult into the injury, the call that he received about his van was on a Friday afternoon from a neighbor telling him that he had a flat tire. He grumpily took his car over to a nearby station to have it repaired or fixed. As he was complaining about the tire, Adonai must have been thinking, "You idiot, do you want to sell the van or not?" It was at the station that the buyer saw him and the deal was complete. There are times when we see the good that comes out, and there are times when we don't. In my opinion, I would say that it is unusual for us, because sometimes we don't know what is to come in 2 minutes, or even in a minute. How much more 2 minutes? You want to sell your car and you begin to complain, "Oh, the flat tire, la 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 la," but you don't know that God used that flat tire in order for you to meet the buyer that is going to do what? Is going to buy the car. So sometimes in a negative situation, a positive thing can come. So that is why we are saying, even though with all this situation of COVID-19, there's going to be a positivity that is going to to come out. We might not understand it now, but I'm rest assured, and I'm not able to be rest assured that there will be, sure, 100%, there will be a positive thing that is going to come out of it, that we are going to derive, and we are going to enjoy it. There are times that we see the good that comes out of things, and there are times that we don't. The Torah was given in the wilderness, a place where we were clearly not in control of what is happening around us. That is a fundamental component of accepting the Torah and living the life of the Torah accordingly. Internalizing the concept that all we can do is make the proper effort. Once that's been done, the steering wheel is handed over to far more competent hands. At that point, we can relax and enjoy the ride. That is what I'm saying, that who is the captain of your ship? I am not saying, even as it is said in the Messianic writing, that Israel that want to achieve righteousness could not achieve that righteousness, or that want to achieve the truth. Torah could not achieve it. Why? Because they are all doing it by what? By work, not by faith. And the Gentiles, who are not even moving much into righteousness, could be able to derive that by what? By faith. But I want us to understand perfectly well what Rabbi Shaul is speaking here. Rabbi Shaul is telling us that these two things go hands in hands. You cannot separate work and faith. Faith and work goes together. They are what? They are like DNA. They are intertwined. So that when you do your work, the work of the Torah, you have the faith. Rest assured that this thing that you are doing will yield result, and that is what is going to happen. But if you say, okay, I'm not interested in the faith, I'm only going to do only the work of the Torah, then you make the Torah to be what? Burdensome. It becomes very heavy, and it becomes very difficult to fulfill, because you only depend upon only the mitzvot, and that is not only because there are things that is above the mitzvot that have to be carried by faith. And with the Gentiles too, they say everything is by faith and faith and faith, and they don't want to do the work. That also does not work. We have to do both together. Both are entwined. They are like DNA. Both of them has to be done. You cannot choose one over the other. That is exactly what Rabbi Shaul is speaking about. That what he's saying, that both has to be done for us to actually realize the true work of the Torah. The Torah is the tree of life. To those that take hold of it. And so therefore it's telling us that we have to do what? Internalize what we hear. Not only it goes in here and it comes out here. No, but we have to internalize it, we have to digest it, and we have to allow the seed to do what? To begin to germinate. We have to allow people to be seen that yes, these people are different people. That the people of Kehillah Beta Israel are not just Jews or Gentiles alone, but they are what? They are the children of the living God, because their way of life, their activities is completely different. They can bear the witness for the fruit that is coming in, or that is coming out of you. They can see that absolutely this is a different human being. So what I'm saying is that the Torah is given to us in the wilderness, where we don't have control over anything. Because you don't come and say, tomorrow it is by my power that I receive the Torah. It is by my righteousness that I receive the Torah. It is by my smartness that I receive the Torah. It is because I'm the most handsome or the most beautiful person on the planet. That is why God has chosen me. Or I'm the strongest person on the planet. That's why God has chosen me to give me the Torah. No. God favors our forefathers. Because of our forefathers, because of Abraham Abenu, because of Isaac Abenu, because of Jacob Abenu, that God extended his promise to his children. And not only to his children, and through his children to the rest of the world. That we can be a light to the rest of the world. That through us, other people will come into the knowledge and the wisdom of the living God. So that is what the Torah is all about. It is not given because you are the most handsome person, or you are the most beautiful person, or you are the most strongest. No. It's given because God loves you, because He favors you, because He wants to use you as a positive example to the rest of the world. And we as Israelites has to act accordingly to the promise that we have promised that we will do, and we are going to hear. That we are going to carry the body of the Torah to the end of the ark. That we are going to show everybody the beauty of the love of God. Once that is done, then you can relax, you can enjoy, and God can take control. Though I don't want you to say, okay, you are in control. I know it is very hard for you to give over control of your life to anyone else. I know it because man is always a kind of a being that is rigid. His ego is in him. He doesn't want to be seen as feeble. No, but at this time, God is saying, okay, this is the wilderness that we are going to sit down and we are going to talk. And then who is going to be who? Are you going to say that you are smarter than God, or we are smarter than God? No, that's the reason why He decided to give us the Torah. Not in Egypt, not in the land of Israel, but in what? In the wilderness, where He can have our 100% attention, where He can teach us the Torah. For 38 years, we have been taught the Torah every blessed day, so that we can understand the concept of the print of the universe. For the Torah is a print, the background or the foundation of the universe. So I really enjoy us, my people, please, to understand this message. Are you in that wilderness now of your life? Are you thinking that the whole thing is crumbling around you? Are you saying, oh, you lost somebody, or you lost a friend, or this and that through the COVID, or through one thing or the other, and you think that is the end of the world? There is hope. The Holy One is telling you there is hope that is with you, that is with us, that what we just need is our attention. It's just our ears, just for us to be able to just listen and see that in that wilderness that you think that you are, where there is no water, where there is danger, where there is snakes and scorpions everywhere. But He also promised you, He also promised us that we are going to mash those lions and those dragons and those scorpions and those snakes. We are going to mash them under our feet. That is Psalm 91. Say, don't be afraid. He's with us. He's going to lead us through. He's going to guide us through. He's going to only what He deserves from us, or only what He wants from us is our attention. Just for us to be able to listen and hear Him out, because He loves us. He doesn't want us to go astray. He brought us to the wilderness. He brought us to that wilderness that you are experiencing at the moment for a reason. Don't be angry. Don't turn back and don't abandon Him. That's the reason why He brought you to this wilderness. That's the reason why He brought us to the wilderness, that He will to give us the Torah. And the wilderness that you are now is going to turn into a place of blossomness. For in the wilderness, God made the wilderness to blossom for the people of Israel, for His people. And your wilderness that you are now at the moment, you are going to blossom. It's going to blossom, and you are going to glorify the name of the living God. Only thing is for you to do what? To listen and obey, and everything will be well. Who is the captain of your ship? Who is the captain of your ship? Is the question. And I want you to digest this and think of it very, very deep. For you to think of it extremely deep. Who is the captain of your ship? Do you think you can lead yourself? No. Do you think your husband can lead you all the way? No. Do you think your wife can lead you all the way? No. Do you think anyone can lead you all the way? No. You have to give that control unto God. Yield it, give it, and God will direct you in the right path. Shabbat Shalom.